Bitcoin mining is the connection between the real world and the physical expenditure of energy and the Bitcoin network and the transactions that are required to be processed. And it's through Bitcoin mining that we have what's called proof of work. And proof of work is the engineering that underpins the value of Bitcoin. So there are nuances to that, but it basically there's something called the difficulty adjustment, which is again connected to Bitcoin mining. If it gets too easy to do the work to verify transactions and get paid, then the algorithm is made more difficult. And this happens every 10 minutes. The system is constantly course correcting, course correcting, course correcting. I guess another thing to mention with Bitcoin mining that's helpful is the idea of stranded energy assets. We didn't touch on this before, but Bitcoin mining activity that's currently happening, like the hash rate that is currently pointed at the Bitcoin network, is the largest computing power ever assembled, to my knowledge. And that's why it's just an extraordinary feat of engineering. Like, all of these people have collaborated together to create this extraordinary decentralized network of computing power to basically defend the Bitcoin network, to prove that things haven't been double spent, to basically help us trust the system. And it's a system of rules, not rulers, right? There's no central banker in there. There's no politician, prime minister, president. There's no head of a bank saying, "Oh, don't worry, trust us. I've sorted this out." It's just all baked in the code, and how it functions on the back end is a thing of beauty. Again, I'm not a super technical person, so I'm not going to try and overcomplicate it like that. But one thing that really struck me as valuable is, and it was a real penny drop moment for me, so it's a good one to mention. I had been part of a startup in the UK that was looking at how we could introduce behavioral economics to help people consume energy at times that were more energy efficient and therefore cheaper. And I learned about the fact that the introduction of renewables into the national grids was actually very difficult because it's not always windy, it's not always sunny. And so you'd get a lot of increased power during these natural events, but how do you flatten that out? How do you combine that with like the halftime break of the football at 8 p.m.? Like, it's really, really difficult to do. And so there's a marketplace on national grids called demand side response. And this is basically when people who currently demand X amount, when there's a big spike in energy demand, they'll sell a reduction in what they actually need to the grid, and they'll get paid for it. So I started learning about the mechanics of national grids and how electricity production and generation and transmission actually happens. And long story short, there's a huge amount of inefficiencies. Like, electricity doesn't travel very well over distances. And anything that makes those systems more efficient is extremely valuable. Well, Bitcoin miners, providing they're actually they can basically be plugged into any energy source anywhere, and then attached to the internet and plugged into the Bitcoin network and monetized. So a physical example is that really brought it home for me is like, you find gas or you find oil. Well, how close are you to a market to sell it to? And in a lot of cases, these energy sources are so far away from where you might sell them that they're just not feasible. You wouldn't drill for oil or you wouldn't drill for gas in these places because it's just too expensive to move it out of them. But in theory, you could stick a Bitcoin miner on there, and you could run turbines, and you could power a whole lot of ASICs, and you can then monetize that power directly to the Bitcoin network with a potentially even like a Starlink, right? You're just tapping into the satellites. And so what happens is Bitcoin mining actually fits into the existing energy networks in a way that's super flexible, and you're able to monetize energy that was otherwise not even being used. Another good example of this is stranded energy asset like a methane gas flare. So, people who are looking for big gas fields, they just stick these flares in, they're just burning it off, right? So you can stick Bitcoin miners into these flares, and instead of just burning it into the atmosphere, you're able to run ASICs and you can make money off of it. Plus, you don't stick the it can be good for emissions. There's this quite funny play where people are selling energy efficiency and carbon reduction technology to oil and gas companies that are actually Bitcoin mining. Like it's this crazy play where it's like it's extremely good for the adoption of renewables, and it's extremely good for the reduction in environmental impact of existing oil and gas resources. The miners would consume energy when the energy is cheapest. So whenever the grid wants to sell them energy at the cheapest time, the miners can be switched on. Whenever that time is, it depends on jurisdiction and it depends on who's in charge. But Bitcoin mining is also a good thing to mention. Extremely difficult business, and it's not one to go into for the faint-hearted. It's extremely specialist and capitally intensive, and ultimately pretty risky. So you need to know what you're doing.